Yeah, if we're talking about Africa, so Africa, it's a European concept. It's not a local concept at all.
We can just erase from memory and talk about, I think the relation between Africa and Europe began in 19th century with colonial explorations. But it's not true. As early as 16th century, there were African bodies being shipped from the continent to the New World, right? So the very beginnings of capitalist modernity is rooted actually in African people's bodies and so on.
Growing up in Nairobi in the 70s and 80s is that we were watching the same TV shows and a lot of the same films that kids in the West are watching. Middle-class kids were experiencing a lot of the same things as kids in the West. And the thing that it took a while to understand is a lot of these films had nothing to do with us. There's there's virtually no representation of us young African urban kids in any of these films. A lot of them were predominantly white actors. A lot of them, if they were people of color or African or black, were very different from our experience in our life. So I think as an artist, you start to investigate these very lovely minutiae of culture and go, well, why is this and where am I in this story?
We live in a material world in which the things we see determine shape our expectations. And that's the thing. So in the art world, if I go back to that model, if I keep going to the museum and only seeing white bodies in pictures when I go to the museum, then I don't expect to see black bodies in the museum, because then I don't think they belong there. But if I make black bodies and those black bodies end up in the museum too, and you come to the museum and I go to the museum, I see black bodies, I see white bodies, I see Asian bodies, I see Latino bodies, then I don't have this, then when I go to the museum, I expect to see those kinds of things every time I go. That matters a lot.
The aesthetic of what's beautiful for women, also what's professional, is very narrow. So if you're supposed to have your hair straightened, and if you do have curls, it has to be the very loose, accessible kind of curls. And when you're born black, your hair doesn't grow like that from your head. So you spend a lot of time trying to make it look like that. And while you're spending all that time, you're also internalizing society's message to you that your hair the way it is, that something is wrong with it.
I think what the colonial process does, or any process of domination, is first of all the erasure of the memory of the subjugated, right? You literally erase the memory of who they are, their memories of their past, the memory of their being, as a people. So after erasing that memory, you plant another memory, the memory of the colonizer or the memory of the one who's dominating.
My name is Michael Abbas. I'm commenting on the video Luam just showed me, and how I felt about the video was, social stigmas that black men and women have to go through, pretty much like having like a certain type of hair and feeling as if like, oh, is something wrong with my hair, and how like you have to grow up like, living that stereotype, and you have to live up to that social standard, and like, just conforming to what society wants you to be, which is kind of pretty unfair for like black men and women and black kids, growing up. It's pretty hard on us. Also, I think it talked about like, I think there was like one girl, and she said like she was like mixed with like different, like she was from like Nigeria, Ghana, other stuff. And like, I don't know, I'm not too sure like on like what she said, because like so short, but like I'm pretty sure like she was saying like, I don't know, she found difficulties in who she was, and how like she found difficulties on like who she was, and like, people just couldn't accept the fact that she was just like she was like more than one like ethnicity and stuff like that, and like just pretty much stereotypes. That's what I got, and like how it's just hard. But, yeah.
Hey, my name is Gene, and as I watched the video, basically what I took from it was that society has been conditioning us to not want to be true to our roots and accept our culture for real. Because they said in the video that they want us, well, when the artists or writers, they go to like Nigeria and such, they see the actors that have like bleached skin and stuff, they're not truly representing who they are. They're trying to be something different, and that's because society has conditioned us to not want to accept how we've been created and stuff, which is why we don't like, we take natural hair and stuff for granted and stuff, because that's not what society views as like being normal and stuff. So which is why people always like do extra stuff, like, so basically we're being underrepresented because they don't want us to like give us a sense of like culture. So which is why we have like in the Black community a lot of people being something that they're not, because we've been socialized to say that that's not the norm and such. The norm is like not to be African or such, which is why when you go to a lot of these third world countries, like people bleach their skin and they wear wigs and stuff because they're not trying to truly represent themselves.
Hi, my name is Sari Arja, and after watching the video, it kind of taught me that African, or being African, is an idea that's been given from the European people when Africa was being taken over and slaves were being sold. So necessarily like the African people did not grasp that idea of being African by themselves, but instead it was handed to them. So, and they ended up embracing it, but it's not theirs to begin with, because technically back then they just thought it was them on the world, not other people around. So when, of course, new people were introduced, they were all of a sudden being called slaves and transported to different countries, which that wasn't their own choice, it was someone else's. Therefore, African is not necessarily theirs to call theirs, but they've embraced that culture because it's like almost like a living womb to show off.